Welcome to The Sign Off, the marketing podcast for marketing people who want to chat about marketing. Every 2 weeks, we'll be chatting about a topic and how brands are using it to see if we'll give it the sign off. I'm Liz Hawkins.
And I'm Lydia Jones. We've made marketing and now we teach marketing and are generally a little obsessed about marketing. So if you want to listen to two Gen Xers talk about marketing in today's crazy old world, stick around.
Hello, Lydia. It's really great to be back.
Hi Liz, how are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. What are we talking about today?
So today's podcast is all about the marketing myths, and there are lots of those around.
So good. So many juicy ones.
I thought we'd start off with a nice easy number, and I'm sure we've all heard this. Loyalty is cheaper than acquisition.
What a load of old shit. So it's cheaper to keep customers than it is to acquire new ones. Yep. If you keep 5% of your customers, you'll make 80% more profit or some other rubbish like that.
Yeah, it might be true if we didn't give away all of the stuff with our loyal customers or discount it quite so heavily to keep them.
So discounting is slightly different, but discounting basically is like the number one eating of all profit. So try and avoid discounting if you can. But the whole loyalty thing is, I grew up, when I first started marketing many, many moons ago, I worked in loyalty, essentially. I did email programs and websites and all of that. And it was this kind of old wives' tale that basically, if you keep your customers, you don't have to bother to get new ones. It's just not the case because you're a leaky bucket anyway. Mm-hmm. So you're always leaking out customers and they'll go off and buy your competitors or whatever. But conversely, all of your competitors' customers are your customers as well. Yep. So it is actually better to just keep on filling in the top of the bucket.
I also think we especially as the internet has moved on, we are much, much more transient with how we shop. And even if we are quite an advocate of a brand, we are likely to shop around. Yes,
so shopping around is very much easier than it has ever been because of the old price comparison. You go into John Lewis and you print out a thing from AO or whatever and say, give me the 25% discount. But loyalty programs, so anything from your 10 stamps in Costa. Your Costa or Nero's or whatever, to very complicated loyalty scheme like an Amex, it costs a lot to kind of administer and deliver. And essentially what you're doing is you're basically offering some sort of discount to people who are already going to shop with you anyway.
Yeah.
So you might as well not bother.
And I have to say, I have fallen hook, line and sinker for the Amex BA card. I am loving collecting the Avios points. And I thought, and I've just achieved my companion fare voucher.
Oh, well done. Yeah.
Which means I've spent £15,000 on that card.
Oh, my God.
And I paid £300 for the card.
You pay £300 a year?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's nuts.
So I haven't got anything, really.
No, you haven't really got anything except a whole bunch of points, which, you can get a flight to Amsterdam or something, which is fine.
But I have to say, I'm loving it. I have loved doing it.
Yeah, well, collecting points and getting those tiers are as much about status for your customers than it is about any kind of discount. So to engender some sort of sense of status is quite an interesting proposition for a loyalty scheme. But on the whole, loyalty doesn't actually... So a loyalty scheme, most people don't take advantage of any of the things. So about 60% of people never redeem any of the points or whatever.
They all live for breakage. Yep.
So that's that. And then you're rewarding people who are your heavy users.
Yep.
So
you're giving it away when they would have bought anyway.
They would have bought it anyway. And heavy users actually are not where the profit is in a funny sort of way, because especially for fast moving consumer goods, most of your volume comes from people who buy very infrequently. So loyalty scheme, any kind of loyalty scheme is not really going to impact them anyway. Okay. So it's just a complete kind of a little bit of a waste of money. So I would never sign off a loyalty scheme if I was working in a brand and they were like, right, what should we focus on? Should we focus on getting the balance between brand building and sales driving activity and maximizing reach and really sort of understanding our customer? Or should we invest millions of quid in like a really expensive and complicated loyalty scheme, I think I know which one I would advise. Yeah.
You also said something really interesting earlier about email campaigns, because there's also a myth that they are dead.
Email campaigns actually are very, very effective. It's like one of those weird kind of sort of anomalies of like marketing, is that everybody thinks, oh no, we're going to invest everything in like TikTok and social media and whatnot. Actually, email campaigns are phenomenally successful.
Yeah, and phenomenally cheap. It's just when people do them really, really badly and spam you crazily.
Yeah.
Hello, Temu.
Temu, oh dear. But funnily enough, so I've got examples of good and bad brands. So, like for example, so a brand that does really badly in email that I had to actually tell them to stop, which very, very rarely happens, was I bought, okay, this might be a bit too high, but I bought a vibrator.
Yes.
Yeah, I bought a vibrator, and it was like a really, really expensive one. It was like 120 quid or something.
God, did it buy you dinner as well?
Oh my God, it was, I mean, it's like the best vibrator I've ever had, first of all. But ever since I've bought this bloody vibrator, right, how many fucking vibrators does one person need? One, maybe two in their whole life. And then it breaks, and then you buy another one, right? I got maybe an email from this company who only sell vibrators. They sell vibrators. That's it. They don't do anything else. I probably got like 3 emails a week for like about 6 months before I finally like unsubscribed. It's absolutely ridiculous.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So there you go. You can like do a bit, being a bit over the top.
Spamming is still, I think they fall into the category of, oh, marketing's easy. Anybody can do it. I could knock out an email.
Yeah, unfortunately, a good email, but some people don't know how to do A/B testing with email. So you A/B test like a small proportion of your base, of your customer, database, and you do like maybe 5% or whatever. And you test like, okay, we're going to do this subject line or this subject line, and then the one that gets the most open rate wins, and then off you go. So like most people can't even do that properly. So they do use it a bit spammily, but like some companies do it really, really well. Like for example, Innocent Drinks,
yes,
always done emails brilliantly, and they do stuff about the most random things, but it's so funny and it's so on brand.
Yeah.
So you can do it brilliantly and you can do it terribly.
I think that dials into the next myth that you had down here, was that marketing only works with massive budgets.
Yeah, so everybody thinks, oh my God, I need to be a massive brand with like millions and millions of dollars in order to like affect change. It's just not true.
No. And I think even more so now with social media.
Yeah, I mean, social media is not free, and you have to be quite skilled in order to get it right.
Yep, absolutely.
But it's very, very easy to test and learn. So you can learn a lot by doing various different campaigns. Oh, what works, what doesn't. Okay, let's do more of that, less of that. You can use it as a way to really understand your audience. Yep. And you can do it relatively cost effectively, especially now with AI tools. You don't need a whole heap of like craft
software
skills.
And stuff, yeah.
So, I think it's actually quite interesting. But yeah, you don't need millions and millions of pounds. But also, people think, oh my God, right, if I'm going to advertise on ITV, I need like a budget of $1 million. You don't actually. TV advertising is relatively cheap, but it is very, very effective. Much more effective than getting 10,000 views on a TikTok video.
I think people have fallen into the trap of thinking everything must be uber targeted, whereas actually broadcast works in some ways. And I think they've also forgotten that TV has moved on from it being 3 channels, where it was ridiculously expensive just to buy the media, and then you had the creative on top. Whereas I think it's dropped down, where you've got much, much more targeted TV now.
Yeah.
You can be much more creative about where you put it and how you show it.
Yeah. And media owners are really, really open to working with brands as well, especially smaller brands, to make the best of their channels and make the best of their platforms. So I think Sky do quite an interesting thing where you can be very, very targeted on their Sky boxes, because obviously they know loads about who's watching and what programmes. And so if you're like me and I sit and watch Sky, and then my dad sits and watches his Sky, the ad breaks in the same programme that we're watching are very different.
Really?
Yeah, it's that targeted.
That's
so,
good.
It's kind of a bit more akin to like a social media targeting. But yeah, I think you don't have to have millions of pounds. You don't have to have expensive agencies. Like the smaller businesses that are doing it really well are, you start small and then you grow and grow and grow. So yeah, I think it's open to everyone. That's why marketing is such an interesting discipline, because everybody can do it.
Which brings us on to that other myth of everybody can do it, but not everybody can do it well.
Yeah, so everybody thinks they're a copywriter. It's like that.
Content marketing's easy. You could just wing it. Of course you can.
Yeah, so I think that I love when The Apprentice does the advertising episode. I think it's hilarious because they've got like some agency bod from like, I don't know, Ogilvy or something, like judging all of the ads that these idiots are making. And then they all basically make the most terrible, generic, stereotypical ads. And everybody thinks, oh my God, you just have to like talk about the product loads and that's fine. And there's a kind of like fun, even amongst like very sophisticated marketers, there's like a real fundamental misunderstanding of how marketing actually works, particularly advertising. So, most people think, okay, right, it's just a very efficient communication of information from the product or the company to the consumer, right?
If I make it really clear what the features and benefits are, you will definitely buy it.
Yeah, exactly. So people assume that it's like people have got 100% perfect information and 100% attention on your message.
Yep.
It's not true. Most ads kind of work like when people are sort of half paying attention to it and they're not really taking it in. And so you have to sort of prioritise being attention grabbing and entertaining versus informative.
Yeah.
So I was watching, I was doing these Marcoms seminars, which are level 6, so third year students. And we were talking about brands, right? Talking about communications. And what I'm doing with them each week, I'm playing them like one of these like classic ads. And then we break it down in terms of like, okay, what's the problem they were trying to solve and like what's the insight they're using and da 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 da. And today we talked about Cadbury's Gorilla.
God, how old is that?
I mean, it's like 15 years or something. Yeah, it's old. So what's interesting about Cadbury's Gorilla is that whilst it's a brilliant ad, and it was incredible, and everyone like lost their minds about how brilliant it was, didn't say anything about the product, really.
No.
Other than like...
Didn't have a purple background.
Had a purple background, so it was kind of like relatively well branded, but not really. I mean, not really in today's standards, let's just say. It was back then when kind of attention was less important. But what was bad about that idea, it wasn't sustainable because it was about a generic category benefit of chocolate, which is joy. Right? Anybody can say that. Oh, eating chocolate brings you joy. Oh, that's really boring.
Eating Chris does it as well.
Eating Chris, having a nice cup of tea. So it's a generic benefit and it's not anything really to do with Cadbury's. And that's fine. But what people misunderstand about how advertising actually works is that what you're trying to do is you're trying to get people to pay attention and then associate you with something. So McDonald's do it really well in the sense of like it's very well branded. You know the M and the colours and the do and all of that. But all they do is basically show the culture of people interacting with their food in a restaurant. That's all they do, and they've done it for like nearly 20 years now. And so you associate McDonald's with very normalised behaviour that everybody does. Like their launch ad was, there's a McDonald's for everyone. And what they were really trying to counteract is the idea that McDonald's is a bit of a shame purchase. So Cadbury's Gorilla talks about a generic benefit that isn't really anything to do with Cadbury's. And the glass and a half thing, which is one of their core brand like attributes, is kind of like ignored. Whereas the current strategy, which is all about generosity,
I think fits better.
Which is so much better because it's much more specific to Cadbury's. Not only in the product, so originally it was a glass and a half of milk, and that kind of changed chocolate for like the entire industry because other brands had like this kind of gritty, bitty, kind of like
Hershey's kind of
like ranky kind of like oily, bitter kind of taste to it, and it wasn't very nice. Whereas Cadbury's came along and just upped the fat content and made it like creamy and nice. So it was generous with the product, but it's also generous with the business because Cadbury's was run by the Quakers. And the Quakers are very like sort of like socialist in a way, because they basically built Bourneville.
They did, yeah.
And they built nice houses for their workers, unlike the slums of East London or whatever. And, you know, they gave like healthcare to their workers, free healthcare. It was before the NHS. And they gave like education to their children. And that was considered very generous. So it's very like core to their
ethos,
product and the company as well. So that's why it works. Also, generosity. The product has a role, because I'm giving you a bar of chocolate as a generous act.
Or sharing. Which is their new advert.
The sharing is brilliant. But the generous, like, I'm a 6-year-old giving my mum a birthday bar of chocolate, negotiated by the, you know, with little plastic toys. Yep. That's so cute, that one. Or like, I'm a dad giving my daughter who's working a night shift a bar of chocolate. Or I'm a son giving my dad who's first day at work and he's feeling a bit shit about himself. So it's that sort of small act of generosity. So there's a role for the product.
Yeah.
Like front and centre. So that's why I think that campaign is brilliant. But that is fundamentally understanding how advertising works. You're connecting with your audience emotionally. So generosity. Oh, it feels good to watch that ad, doesn't it?
Yep.
And you're associating yourself with something that's unique to you or distinctive to you. And you're entertaining.
And also you're rewarded by doing the act that they suggest.
Yeah.
So when you give away, you get that feeling of generosity or joy or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it works nicely.
It does. Going back to, you mentioned McDonald's, and I know you worked on them, the new Stormzy ad.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, people don't like it.
No.
Because also they're like, how is 9 chicken nuggets actually going to fill up Stormzy? And also it's not a good fit because he's got like some health thing going on, hasn't he?
Yeah, and I also was a bit shocked that actually he's just eating their stuff. There's no special menu, no special burger, no tailoring. There's no buy the Stormzy burger. You know, when they normally have
the special
somebody.
Things, I think it's a bit of a misstep for them, to be honest. It strikes me as, why haven't they done it before? Which is like, I don't know, the Stella McCartney meal, what she orders, which is a veggie burger, obviously. Or like, you know, other British kind of celebrities, like the Spice Girls burgers.
Yeah.
Or whatever, like, why haven't they done it before? Oh, there's probably a reason. And also, Stormzy, it seems good on paper, but actually they didn't do their research properly. Which is like, he's a health nut. Like, eating McDonald's is not... That's why McDonald's can't blooming sponsor a Team GP.
Do you think that's why they got Stormzy? Because he is a health nut and they want to position McDonald's as not being a cheap meal?
I don't think so.
Do you not?
No.
Do you think they just got it wrong?
They got it wrong,
Yeah.
Never mind. What next on the myth-busting trail?
Oh, yes, this is a good one. Negative publicity is better than no publicity at all.
Yeah, load of shit. Sorry. Look at Jaguar.
Yes. That's fallen off a cliff. Nobody's talking about it now. AI is going to take all of our jobs.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this a little bit last time, didn't we, about AI when we did our 2025 trends.
Yeah, I think it's going to change our jobs. I don't think it's going to take them.
Yeah, I think it's not going to take our jobs. I think it will take some people's jobs, for sure, especially maybe like mock-up merchants.
Yep.
Although maybe those guys will use their skills in other ways. But it's a tool, you know, like we need to utilise it in a way that makes sense. Using it to come up with ideas. I mean, until it gets better at it, at the moment, you use it for any kind of idea generation. All the ideas are so derivative.
And very generic.
Generic, bland, derivative. And I'm sorry, generic, bland and derivative doesn't work in marketing, for sure.
It certainly doesn't work now because it's so competitive. And what I mean by competitive, it's you're competing for so many, that little speck of consumer attention.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to get, I think.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked about this the other day about like the value of art and creativity in general. Is the fact that a human has done it, and the fact that it's impressive that this human has used their imagination and their brain and their craft to come up with something that's unique to them, meaningful, and adds value to the world. I mean, if a machine can do it, we won't value it as much. No. Therefore, it probably devalue everything because it's so easy to come up with some sort of creative object.
Yeah,
now.
I suppose that's the difference between somebody painting something and photographing something.
Yeah, but photographs are a different form of art, you know, because you're sort of capturing something that's real rather than painting as like a sort of interpretation of something, isn't it? So, you know, I think the human endeavour aspect of creativity is not to be underestimated in terms of people's perception of the value of art and people's enjoyment of it. So there you go. But AI is definitely going to be a part of our world
forever.
Whether AI will take over, you know, the job of a lecturer or the job of a strategist, I don't know.
I don't think it'll take over the job of a lecturer, because it really is that learning sweet spot is the conversation that you have with the student and that eureka moment. Yeah. And like today when we were talking about the unsolvable problem.
Oh, yeah.
You know, there was a few students that were just like, got it. Because if they managed to take the draw the problem from what we were trying to do into the strategy that we'd given them, the tools to solve problems, they were like, I now get it.
Yeah, and that is uniquely human in a way. I mean, maybe machines will be able to do that at some point, but at the moment they can't. All they're doing is they're basically regurgitating the stuff that has been trained
or put in there previously.
Yeah, so
they're not creating new.
For example, like Tom York from Radiohead and like a whole bunch of other musicians are basically saying you can't have our stuff to train AI, because AI is potentially taking away our job and devaluing our art. And how dare you use it to make your AI better? And I think good on him.
Yeah,
good on them. Because it's like shit in, shit out, right?
Yep.
And at the moment, it's pretty derivative. Like, I looked at like Midjourney, and there's this thing on X where, you know, that really famous portrait, photograph of like an Afghanistani woman, and it's absolutely beautiful. Like, she's got like a red headscarf on, and she's got like piercing blue eyes.
Yes.
And she's like an Afghani woman, and I think it's from the 90s, I think. Anyway, you go into Midjourney and say, can you give me a portrait of an Afghanistani woman? And it literally gives you that, but more shit. So it's not like her face is like off to one side and then looking like really like, and it's really poignant and beautiful. Whereas like the AI version is just her straight on. So it's like not as good.
No.
But yet still derivative. And it's like when students use blooming ChatGPT or something to write their essays or their reports, like they think that we don't know. But I can tell.
Yeah.
And the reason I can tell is A, they haven't changed the grammar.
No.
So they've got all American spellings. Suddenly, you can now spell digitization with a Z, can you? And so they haven't changed the spelling, and the language suddenly gets like quite formal but really boring.
Yes, quite bland.
Super bland. It's a blandization, and then the sort of argument structure is quite sort of logical, but yet not very imaginative.
Yeah,
and it has no personality to it whatsoever.
And it's very non-committal language as well. It doesn't suggest either way or show any critical thinking.
There's no critical thinking. Why do they bother? Like, there's a Rory Sutherland video going around about like the value of. Yeah, my friend. The value of university assignments, right? And actually, no one has ever really read their assignments that they wrote in university. Like, you're probably never going to read them again, right? But because they're 100% shit, most of them, right? Absolute rubbish and have no real value, the output. But the value is the process you went through and the pain you went through and the research you went through in order to get to the output. Right? And if you bypass that and you just use ChatGPT to give you an output, then you're basically devaluing your entire academic process.
Yep.
And you won't develop those skills which you need in order to conduct yourself in a professional capacity, like analytical skills, like research skills, like consolidation skills, like filtering, what's useful, what's not useful, articulating.
Yeah, no.
And like, if you can't do that, well, good luck to you, mate. Yeah.
The thing is, you can, not to harp on about this too much, you can see it. You know, you can scrape through your first year doing it. You could probably get a fairly good mark in your second year doing it. But I think by the time you get to level 6, where there's so that when the marking criteria swings so much towards
critical thinking,
you don't score well.
No, because you can't think.
No, exactly.
Because, like, you saw it today, right? They're only level 4, bless them.
But they
right?
had a good go.
Problem solving. Like, half of them were switching off because it was too hard.
Yeah.
And the whole point was it was really, really difficult, probably unsolvable problem. But you're meant to give it a go anyway and see how far you can get. Like, most of them, like, got to the first hurdle and were like, oh, fuck it, I can't be bothered.
Exactly, yeah. And that also gives you a little bit of insight into their generation.
They've got, like, fragile, you know, and it's so bloody fragile. Like, they like, haven't got any resilience in them at all.
No.
Never mind.
But they'll grow up. They're only little babies at the moment.
Yeah.
You've got to give them time. Speaking of which...
what's next on the list?
One of the key ones that we've just been talking about, engagement. Engagement is critical.
Well, it depends what you mean by engagement. I think the thing is that advertising works through sort of half paying attention and repetition. That's basically how it works. So you're sort of exposed to these ideas that sort of change over time, but essentially are consistent. So, for example, the Cadbury's generosity thing, there's loads and loads of different examples of generosity and like sharing and whatnot. And you sort of build up an impression of the brand, right? And that works over the long term. We know that. Whereas, like, engagement, what do you mean? Do you mean, like, number of views on YouTube, like number of likes and number of comments?
I think what we mean here by engagement is the social media, like, shares, comments. But the problem with, if you're chasing engagement numbers, is you can drive it with rage baiting. You can drive it all sorts of ways. Whereas, actually, if you're delivering a really good ad that's mildly, you know, as on brand, you look at some of the good brands, unless they've got a hilarious sense of humour like Ryanair. Well,
that's questionable, but yes.
They are really witty, though. I mean, it's not...
In a funny sort of way, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Ryanair fan, but...
Ryanair for me is like a punch in the face. That's basically what it is.
I don't like Ryanair. But I do like their social media. I do find it quite funny.
Their social media is good, yeah, to be fair.
But I think that just saying engagement is critical isn't...
I think it's absolute load of shit, to be honest. Like, I lived through, we need, like, people uploading their versions or, like, user-generated content or, like, people sharing the hashtag and da-da-da-da-da. Like, it doesn't actually matter. Like, what matters is, are you reaching a maximum amount of people multiple times in terms of how you can afford? Are you prioritising new customers and reaching new people and associating your brand with as many different points of entry into the category as possible and sort of building your salience in terms of different trigger points for, oh, I want an ice cream, or, oh, I want a, you know, a refreshing drink or whatever, depending on what your product is. Are you doing that? Great. If you're doing that, then fill your boots with engagement. It's like nice to have, but it's not a critical for sure. No,
I
thank
don't
you.
think it's up there anywhere. The other one that kind of relates to that I think is a load of old tot is great products and services sell themselves, and this is a goad-in kind of, you know, don't build products, you know, build products that customers want, kind of.
Well, the challenge is that it depends on the product, right? So products like, for example, the iPod, when it first launched, no one fucking knew what it was. So they had to put the picture of the blooming thing, and then they had next to it 1,000 songs in your pocket. That's a brilliant product ad, because it basically tells you exactly what it is. And they didn't dick about with, like...
But it didn't sell itself.
Of course it didn't.
We had to explain.
Well, you had to tell you what it was and the benefit, right? It's 1,000 songs in your pocket. They didn't say it's like 500 gigabytes or whatever it was.
No.
Because no fucker knows what gigabyte is, and they still don't.
It's a fine line between knowing what the product or selling what the product is and just falling down the features and benefits rabbit hole.
Yeah, so features and benefits rabbit hole is silly, really, because, like, for example, like Gillette, right? How many bloody razors do you actually need on your thing? It's like 10, isn't it? And then there's smooth thing, like, and then Harry's razors or like Dollar Shave Club come along and say, don't be an idiot spending all your money on basically a sports, you know, sponsorship deal.
Yeah.
So it's difficult. But yeah, I think it's a fine balance between like building the brand and like associating the brand with all those different aspects and as many different aspects as possible that's relevant in terms of points of entry and telling customers like what your product actually is.
Yeah, and how it solves whatever problem it is.
Yeah, but most people don't have a differentiated product.
No.
Because like technology is so good now and manufacturing capacity is so good that it's much more like equal. So, you know, and patents and all of that sort of stuff. So
more a point of parity now.
It's more like important to sort of create a distinctive brand that means something different to like a differentiated functional brand.
Yeah.
Unless you've actually got a different product, then go for it.
Yeah, that's
What's next, Liz?
few and far between. Investing in a brand is at odds with selling.
Oh, yeah. So the old dichotomy of like, well, it used to be above the line, below the line. That was the old split, right?
Yes.
Apparently that was invented by like P&G or Unilever because of like some...
I remember being above the line marketing manager.
Lucky you. Get to play with the big boys.
I spent a lot of time having my nails done.
Oh, how nice.
It was the 80s.
Well,
What can I
lovely.
say?
So, yeah, above the line used to be like, okay, everything that external agencies did, and then below the line was all the boring shit that the client did themselves, like coupons and stuff like that. So, whereas it's still kind of the same now, but now it sort of went traditional marketing and then digital marketing, which is kind of ridiculous considering like you can build brands online and you can sell like do sales promotion offline.
Well, there was an assumption though when we did the whole new media and offline
old media, new media.
that every consumer went, oh, I will never look at a TV or a magazine or a newspaper ever again.
Yeah, and then there's a kind of like a sort of prejudice against traditional stuff
Because it was
because it's not. Yeah, it's difficult to measure. So brand is quite difficult to measure. Let's just put that on the table. And what we mean by brand is something that is less kind of like producty and salesy, perhaps, and is more about like creating meaning in people's minds. So what does a brand stand for?
Yep.
And it's not purpose, let's say.
Let's be honest.
Absolutely not. Not all the time anyway. And it's meant to work on the long term. So that's the brand stuff, right? And the problem is with this false dichotomy, because it's now labelled as brand building and sales driving, or brand building and activation. And that sort of implies that brand building doesn't do the sales driving stuff, which is actually false. And it sort of, again, creates this false dichotomy that the two are at odds with one another. And the two, like if you invest in brand, you're basically de-investing in sales. Now, depending on your media mix, you can build brands online, for sure, in whatever format, doesn't matter. So you can do it on TikTok, you can do it wherever. You can sales drive offline, in press, in outdoor, in wherever. But it depends on what the content is that you're delivering in those channels. So brand building, actually, the evidence suggests that if you have the right balance, and it's roughly kind of 50-50, or it's meant to be 60-40. So 60% of your spend, this is like overall, depending on different categories, but 60% of your spend roughly should be in brand building because 40% is cheaper to do sales driving stuff because of the media, right? So it's roughly 50-50 in terms of effort. So what does that do? If you have that broad kind of spend, or at least you're tipping more into brand, because most brands prioritize sales driving stuff because they're basically like remunerated every quarter, if not every week. And so if you deprioritize sales a little bit and like invest more in brand, actually by doing that, your brand building activity actually makes your sales driving activity much more efficient and effective. So you're sort of like, you do sales spikes like that and it goes like that. Tom Roach has got a really good graph where it's basically like the sales spikes go like that and it sort of tracks up like that. And then you've got these kind of humps of like brand building stuff that kind of pushes everything up. So that's kind of what you want. Now, in reality, that never happens. I've worked on zillions of brands, and I can say with confidence that probably nearly 100% of those brands do not have that right ratio. They overinvest in sales driving short-term activity and they underinvest in brand because they're like pressured to deliver sales. Now, if you're a brand and you're doing like way more sales driving activity, like short-term stuff with like kind of punchy messaging that's like click now, buy now, discount here, whatever, and you suddenly like take out a whole heap of money and put it into a brand, you will see a decline in sales driving activity, in sales over the short term. For sure.
And it will take, there'll be a lag before your brand building kicks in.
Yeah.
So you've got to stay the course, really. So it's almost like...
That's why it's long term.
Yeah, you're on the hook.
Yeah.
To get off the short term stuff, to get onto the...
Yeah. And part of the sort of myth busting thing is that you shouldn't be offline. So you shouldn't ever go off air, essentially. You should always be on, if you can be, right? And obviously we're not all made of money, right?
No.
So you should try and be always on, or at least like have as little gap as possible between like delivering campaigns. And so you should have that balance between, and it's not like you should only do brand building activity and then you do some sales driving. No, you should have both. And it should track like that. And they should complement each other as well. So they should look the same and like feel like they're from the same brand. But yeah, this whole like battle between brand and sales driving stuff, like they've named it wrong again. Like we have traditional and digital, or old and new, or above the line, below the line. And it sort of creates this weird hierarchy where people
winners
think
and losers.
that like sales driving stuff is kind of grubby, but you have to do it because you need that to drive sales. Yep. And then brand building is kind of like fluffy and unaccountable, and you know it's like a nice to have if you've got loads of money. It's not. You need both.
They work in
It's symbiotic, isn't it?
Yes, that's the word.
Yes.
Right. Lastly, creative pre-testing kills creativity and makes everything safe and bland.
So
Do you think that winds into the whole AI thing?
I'm not sure about the AI stuff. I haven't been in the game whilst AI has been around, so I don't know.
I bet they've been using AI to cut the speed to getting something in front of a client, and it has been bland.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, it depends. I mean, how AI is being used, but in terms of creative testing, so I worked many years on brands that basically you couldn't put anything live that hasn't passed certain creative testing.
Yep.
Okay. So there's different methodologies and different companies that do it. One is like you do it sort of so qualitative testing. So you put it in front of a focus group and they like it or they don't or whatever. And then there's a more kind of like, you could say somewhat robust methodologies, which is more like quantitative. So, you know, you've got like, I don't know, 100 people, 500 people or whatever, and they fill out a survey and they get shown the ad and they, you know, got tracking, facial tracking or emotion tracking or whatever. And there's like various different companies that do it. Now, I was in the world where it was blooming Millward Brown. We did Millward Brown link test, and I'd done so many of these bloody things. And then you got to a point where you could game it. And basically what worked in Millward Brown was mood films that were very choppily edited and in a sort of montage thing with like very clear supers. And that was basically the format that worked in terms of green.
Yep.
Okay. And we had to live through that for years. It was horrible. And then Brain Juicer came along, and they're now called System 1. So System 1 and System 2 is all about like emotion.
We talked about that when we did our...
Yeah, so System 1 actually then said, right, your methodology is shit, Milton Brown. Because it was literally like a lever. So the brain had to engage their System 2 brain to like decide what System 1 thought about it, which is so stupid. And so they did like the facial like emotion tracking thing to try and sort of be more direct in terms of actually what people are feeling. And it is broadly actually quite a robust methodology of all the methodologies, and now everybody else does it, right? Because they basically push the whole industry to do that, which is good because they're recognizing that people aren't rational creatures, and if you ask them like out of 5 how likely are you to buy this product, like it's not actually an accurate representation of what happens. So my experience, and I've never actually worked on a brand that have worked with System 1. I've always been with Kantar. But even when Kantar kind of upped its game and were a bit more System 1-y, it tended to be that, yeah, okay, so safe stuff, the one that I just described to you, they normally get through. But I wouldn't say that it necessarily kills like really wacky creative ideas. Like the whole thing about like Cadbury's Gorilla would have failed Link is not actually true. And System 1 have gone back and like tested everything. You know, they test everything. They test all the Christmas ads. They test everything. And like, generally speaking, like most creative stuff gets through. And what's really interesting about their methodology is that they basically allow clients to kind of make decisions. I always kind of like jokingly said this creative pre-testing is like basically an exercise in art covering, because, you know, if it doesn't work, then they say, well, Milton Brown said it would work. So there's like limited risk for them. Whereas like if you imagine like today's world, right, okay, what's the media budget? Like we've got £500,000 production budget and like £5 million media or whatever. And like, oh, we're just going to go on what we think might work.
Yeah, you can't do that, can you?
Oh, you absolutely cannot do that.
The client would lose their mind.
Well, what happens if it doesn't work? Then the agency gets fired, basically. So it is an exercise in arse covering in a way, but it is a sort of risk mitigation. But to say that it kills creative ideas, I think it actually supports creative ideas. So Kev Chesters always talks about how System 1 really helped him sell through the 3 Dancing Pony ad, which I love. I love that ad. It's so good.
And that was wacky and way out there.
It was absolutely way out there. A bloody moonwalking pony. How ridiculous is that? So it can be a really good partner in making clients feel more comfortable taking risky creative decisions. So I categorically say that is a myth that needs to be busted. Have we got any more?
I think that is actually it. Do you think that we use these short sound bites because we're used to working with social media? And do you think these myths are ways of clickbaiting?
Oh, myths are always clickbaity. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, for example, we haven't talked about linear TV is dead. Everybody talks about linear TV is dead, and it's just not true. I looked at the thing, we do about 4.5 hours a day of
I know, I was
video.
so shocked.
And I think linear TV is about 60% of that.
I was very, very surprised at that.
Yeah, so we're not all just like melting our brains on TikTok. It's not true. We're just sitting down and watching EastEnders.
We are.
Or Coronation Street.
It is. So, we've said no. We haven't signed off at any of these myths.
No, because they're all false. I made sure of it. If anybody else has got any myths that they need busting, just let us know. Email us.
That'd be good.
Yeah.
Send them in.
Send them in, comment, like, share, help the algorithm, be our friends.
Fantastic. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Well, Lydia, that's another fine podcast in the bag. I hope you enjoyed the chip chat and found something useful.
Follow us on socials at the Sign Off Podcast, where a new episode is out every 2 weeks. Send us your questions or comments to signoffpodcast@gmail.com.
See you next time.